morning. Congressman Zeldin was attacked during a campaign speech yesterday. A man with a sharp object was taken to the ground after approaching Zeldin on stage.
A state of emergency declared in Portland. Find out what the declaration addresses.
A forensic psychologist speaks about what could be contributing to the cause of mass shootings.
Dangerously hot temperatures are hitting the U.S. How are Americans dealing with the heat? Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning, and I'm Evelyn Lee. Happy Friday, everybody. Today is the 22nd of July, and we want to start with something that happened yesterday. A man attacked Congressman Zeldin during a campaign speech. The attacker apparently aimed at his neck with a self-defense tool. Zeldin is running for New York governor against incumbent Kathy Hochul. The man was wearing a black baseball cap. He approached Zeldin from the side of the stage during the rally. The congressman says the man repeated, "You're done," and tried to stab him. He was able to grab the man's wrist until he was tackled to the ground. Zeldin says that he's okay. He thinks, though, the man will likely be released instantly under New York's laws. Zeldin finished his speech afterwards and thanked law enforcement for responding to the attack. New York Governor Kathy Hochul condemned the attacker on Twitter. She's saying such violent behavior has no place in New York.
A spokeswoman for Zeldin's campaign says Zeldin and his team members were unharmed.
The suspect has been identified now as 43-year-old David G. Jaguars of Fairport, New York.
He was charged with attempted assault in the second degree, a felony, and immediately released, as the congressman predicted. And over on the West Coast, Portland's mayor has declared a state of emergency over high levels of gun-related crime in the city. He's hoping to reduce gun violence in Portland by at least 10% over the next 2 years.
We will adapt and assess all potential paths forward. The public's expectations are clear, and we've set our goals accordingly. We will not stop until gun violence stops.
The emergency declaration comes with a $2.4 million plan called Safer Summer PDX 2022. It focuses on community-based violence intervention, putting outreach workers into areas of the city with the most shootings. Wheeler hopes to offer a path out for those involved in gun crimes and help those with a high risk of involvement. In the last 3 years, the number of shootings in Portland has doubled. There were almost 700 shootings in the first half of 2022 alone. Wheeler says Portland's police force is overwhelmed and has the fewest amount of officers in 30 years. He says he will put more funding towards police and is hoping to add 10 new officers to the force each month.
Mass shootings are on the rise, and we're all painfully aware. And we're bringing in Dr. Shawnee Anderson, a clinical and forensic psychologist. We'll be discussing the mental health aspects of mass shootings. Thanks so much for joining me today, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you for having me.
I do want to start this conversation with a question, why? Because recently mass shootings have increased as well. So why do you think, what leads to mass shootings?
It's such a great question, and we know that there are a number of factors that can influence that. A lot of it is individuals who are isolated and lonely. They're struggling with depression, a lot of self-hatred. Many of them are suicidal, and so a lot of times they want to take their pain and both express it internally but also express it externally. And so sometimes social media can feed some of this. A number of people who engage in these horrible acts have a lot of family violence at home. They may come from trauma, but some very interesting research is showing that there is actually an alteration of a specific gene in the brain that lowers somebody's threshold for being able to manage stress. And when you have somebody that can't handle stress very much, and then what happens is we find they're often put on very typical antidepressants. Their bodies cannot metabolize that well. And we have found that there is research that has shown that about 98% of mass shooters that have been studied have this genetic risk factor and are also on these specific antidepressants.
That's so interesting. And you did tell me before that your son, there was a shooting in the school of your son, is that right? I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope he's all right.
Thank you. Yes, it wasn't a school. It was actually, there was a mass shooting in 2018 here in Thousand Oaks, California at a country and western bar. And a former Marine came in and actually tragically killed many. And fortunately, my son was able to escape, but it was very traumatizing for him and our entire community.
Wow, yeah, I can only imagine. So, you know, how, obviously also as a mother, how can parents help kids overcome such a traumatic event like this?
It is very devastating. My son is lucky that his mom is a psychologist who specializes in trauma. So, you know, I was able to immediately get him in for help, and he's actually doing really well now. But I actually was running a group both for our borderline survivors as well as those who survived the Las Vegas mass shooting, the Route 91. And so it's very important for parents to talk to their children about what's going on, to be able to get help for them, whether it's group therapy where they can identify with other individuals who have been involved in such traumatic events, or also get involved in some trauma-based psychotherapy where they can address the traumatic impact.
That's interesting. And let's talk about, you know, bolstering mental health programs for a moment. How effective do you think is it in preventing these mass shootings?
Well, that's really the question. It's so hard to talk about prevention because we're having to identify those who are at risk. So even if we were to look at those who are at risk, perhaps because they have that genetic risk factor, or if they're at risk because they've got a history of suicidal behavior, the key is to try to get them into some form of mental health treatment, whether, again, individual counseling or something. And I know ever since the pandemic that it's very difficult even to get in to see a clinician right now because we're so overworked because of all the long-term effects of that. But I think definitely being able to get in to talk to somebody about how you're feeling and to prevent some of these things, to have somebody who can look out for the risk factors.
Very good points. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here today and contributing to this important conversation that's to be had. Dr. Shauna Anderson.
Thank you so much.
A contraception access bill passed in the House Thursday. Democrats are concerned the Supreme Court will review other precedents after overturning Roe v. Wade last month. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in his opinion that the court should reconsider other rulings that established rights to contraception and same-sex marriage. That's because he says they were based on the same legal arguments as Roe. Here's what some House members had to say.
Justice Thomas has added fuel to that fire by stating in Dobbs that the court should reconsider the constitutional right to contraception.
The real reason we're here today is because some of our colleagues would like to distract and scare the American people and score cheap political points rather than tackle the bread and butter issues affecting all Americans.
Women deserve the truth, not more fear and misinformation that forces an extreme agenda on the American people.
Some Republicans, including Representative Michael Burgess of Texas, say the right to contraception is not at risk, though he says passing such a law could lead to access of medical abortion pills or allow the use of drugs that are not fully approved by the FDA yet. The bill is likely to stall in the evenly split Senate.
Missouri's Attorney General is suing the city of St. Louis over a bill that covers the cost of out-of-state travel for abortions. St. Louis Mayor Tishara Jones signed a measure Thursday to create the Reproductive Equity Fund. With Missouri's law restricting abortions taking effect, her goal is to provide financial support to women in need. But Attorney General Eric Schmidt says the provision violates a state law that stops public funds from being used for performing or assisting in abortion. The state also plans to seek a preliminary injunction that would prohibit the city from even creating the Reproductive Equity Fund in the first place. Mayor Jones says she will not back down and vows to help women get reproductive medical care.
The heat wave in the U.S. is causing Americans discomfort all over the country. We take a look at what people are doing to stay safe. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg tells us more.
From Boston to Texas and Arizona, dangerously high temperatures have no immediate sign of relief in sight. With the heat making its way through New England, residents are heading over to the Rose Kennedy Greenway Splash Park to cool down.
It's a strain on the economy, it's a strain on our human body. As I'm sitting here sweating, sweat's pouring down.
Meanwhile, in Texas, public pools are taking safety precautions. Lifeguards are making sure they stay hydrated because they know what can happen in the intense heat.
I've seen a lot of people pass out with this heat. The perception is you're cooler, but the reality is you're probably not. And that's why, as an operation, we take those 10-minute breaks, get people out of the water, out of the sun, and into the shade.
Over in Arizona, residents have seen this before. Heat waves come with the territory.
So I've been working outside in the heat for about the past 3 summers, and I don't think you ever actually acclimate to it. I think you just kind of know it's there and continue to go.
Yeah, I like it because it's quiet out, there's not a lot going on, and you can just have this whole place to yourself, and it's not too hot for an Arizonan.
During this year's heat wave, the National Weather Service is urging people to stay indoors, avoid strenuous activities, and stay hydrated. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
In Massachusetts, a train caught fire crossing the Mystic River in Somerville yesterday. Commuters scrambled to evacuate. Several passengers climbed out of a window. One passenger jumped off the bridge into the river below. About 200 passengers evacuated the train, but no injuries reported. And the person who jumped into the water declined medical attention. The fire is the latest in a string of dangerous problems with the troubled system. It started when a metal seal under one of the train cars came loose and made contact with the third rail. The MBTA has had a number of safety incidents in recent years, including a collision last month.
New York health officials reported a polio case on Thursday. It's the first in the U.S. in nearly a decade. State officials say it appeared the person had a vaccine-derived strain of the virus. They say it could have been from someone who got a live vaccine and spread it.
People who haven't seen that, I don't think understand how bad of a disease it is and just sort of assume it's something they can get over. But it is a disease that is terrible, and it was a remarkable human achievement that we developed a vaccine to protect people from it. If you're vaccinated, it's not something you really have to worry about. But in communities where vaccine coverage is low, then we do worry about spread. And so this is not the first vaccine preventable illness we've actually seen in Rockland County. And just before the pandemic, there was a very large measles outbreak in Rockland County, also due to low vaccine coverage.
Polio spreads mostly from person to person through contaminated water. It can infect a person's spinal cord, causing paralysis. Sometimes it results in disability and death. The disease mostly affects children. Polio vaccines became available in 1955. The CDC says nationwide vaccination campaigns cut the annual number of cases to less than 100 in the 1960s and fewer than 10 in the 1970s. In 1979, polio was declared to be eliminated in the U.S., no longer having a routine spread in the country. Rarely have infected travelers brought polio into the U.S. The last time it happened was in 2013. And coming up, thousands of practitioners of the Falun Gong spiritual discipline visited the U.S. Capitol yesterday. It's the 23rd year of exposing the Chinese Communist Party's attack on their freedom of belief in China. And Japan warns of escalating national security threats. Its annual Defense White Paper report includes the Chinese regime's intimidation of Taiwan. We'll have all that and more for you after this short break. July 20th marked 23 years since the Chinese Communist Party launched an overwhelming persecution campaign to eradicate Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. On Thursday, thousands of Falun Gong practitioners traveled to Washington, D.C. from around the nation to take part in a rally to end the persecution. NTD's Melina Weisskopf brings us more.
Falun Dafa is a spiritual discipline rooted in Chinese culture, revolved around the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Many of these practitioners believe that it's their fundamental human right to practice this here or any country in the world, including China, and that's why they're standing here today. What you see behind me is many practitioners from all over the United States who have traveled here for this very important moment. So it's the 23rd year of the persecution of Falun Dafa. The Chinese Communist Party has cracked down on this since 1999. And one interesting fact that one practitioner of this discipline told me is that they've been coming here to this very lawn every single year since 1999, since the beginning of the persecution.
And more than 2 decades later, their persistence continues, with supporters of religious freedom speaking out to end the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to eradicate this peaceful spiritual practice.
It is always an honor to join you for these important rallies, but we shouldn't have to be here. Yet, here we are, once again calling on the Chinese government to end its persecution of Falun Gong practitioners and other religious believers in China.
One practitioner of Falun Gong tells NTD about her experience growing up in China, where she was fearful every day about her parents and grandma being jailed for their beliefs.
Several times the policemen came to my home and they wanted to arrest my mom, and they also wanted to know where my grandma was. And every time I hear the sound of knocking the door, I was really afraid that the people outside the door were the police.
She tells us her mother was last sent to a brainwashing center in 2018, and the Chinese Communist Party stripped her grandmother of her pension, removing her source of income. But through all the hardship, she tells us why she continued to practice Falun Dafa.
I have been a practitioner since I was a child, and I think Falun Dafa is really good, and truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance is right. I think as a human being, I should stick to what I think is right.
Attendees are calling on the U.S., the leader of the free world, to further expose the persecution of Falun Gong. Many of the speakers called on Congress to pass the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act.
USERF is intently focused on the terrible ongoing reports of forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. This must be condemned by our government, governments around the world, and all peoples of good conscience.
Falun Gong practitioners generally have healthy bodies due to their meditative exercises. Unfortunately, this has led them to become victims of the Chinese Communist Party's forced organ harvesting.
And it's critically important that U.S. health institutions examine their relationships with Chinese hospitals that we have now documented participated in transplantations where they executed the patient.
After the rally, the Falun Gong practitioners marched in a parade down Constitution Avenue to raise awareness among bystanders. This tradition they plan to continue until the CCP's persecution has come to an end. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Japan warned of escalating national security threats on Friday. In its annual defense white paper, it mentions repercussions from Russia's war with Ukraine, Chinese intimidation of Taiwan, and vulnerable technology supply chain. The report sets out the government's security concerns as it prepares the Defense Ministry budget request due next month. It wants to build public support for an unprecedented hike in military funding. The ruling party is looking to double it over the next decade or so. The white paper report also sets the stage for a year-end national security review. It is expected to call for purchasing longer-range strike missiles, strengthening space and cyber capabilities, and tighter controls over access to technology.
The new ambassador to Australia, Carolyn Kennedy, says the United States needs to engage more with the Pacific region at a time when China is asserting its presence. She spoke with reporters at the Sydney International Airport after arriving to take on her new role. Kennedy will formally present her credentials on Monday, filling a post that's been vacant for 18 months. Kennedy, the daughter of late President John F. Kennedy, was ambassador to Japan during the Obama administration. On China's growing assertiveness in the region, she says her focus is on the U.S. partnership with Australia on issues like security, economic engagement, and health. She says the U.S. and Australia working together will make a big impact. Kennedy says the Pacific holds great personal significance. Her father served in the Pacific during World War II and was rescued by 2 Solomon Islands and an Australian coast watcher. The ambassador told reporters she is proud of her family legacy and tries to live up to it.
And up next, Sotheby's New York auctions off the personal collection of American astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and it includes some rare artifacts. And more sharks are visiting Long Island's shores. It seems they're not likely to go anywhere soon. We find out why experts say it's a good thing.
In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.
School districts in some parts of the country are preparing to welcome back students in just a few weeks.
That's right. So for parents, that means back to school shopping, but this time amid historic inflation and recession fears.
According to the National Retail Federation, spending is expected to match last year's record high of $37 billion.
So if that's coming up for you, listen to this one. Here are some tips to save you from breaking the bank to get your kids ready for back to school.
Scissors you have and glue. The back-to-school shopping season is underway, and parents are facing higher prices for just about everything on their list, amid looming recession fears and inflation reaching a 41-year high.
That's food prices, that's rent, and that's back-to-school supplies. So everything's up a lot, and it's really biting into the purchasing power of the typical family.
Meanwhile, a new National Retail Federation survey found 1/3 of consumers say they're spending less in other areas so they can pay for items their children need for school. Financial expert Julie Alma-Taveras says it's good that parents are prioritizing items for school and has these 3 tips to save money. The first step is to make a budget and stick with it. Next, take it slow. Some parents make the mistake of buying too much before school starts, only to find out that their children don't actually need it.
Don't worry about having a back-to-school haul. Don't worry about spending hundreds of dollars on clothes and hundreds of dollars of school supplies. Have a good understanding of what the needs are going to be for that semester or for that year, and take it slowly.
Also, involve the kids. Taveras recommends giving them a set amount and letting them shop with you. That way, it's a money lesson for them too, forcing them to prioritize what they really need.
Don't go too crazy with the stickers and the binders and all of those extra things, because a really important part of financial power and also teaching generational wealth is having these conversations.
In other news, Sotheby's New York is auctioning off the personal collection of American astronaut Buzz Aldrin. Among the highlights of the sale, an in-flight jacket that Aldrin wore on the 1969 Apollo 11 mission.
This is an incredibly rare thing. If you go to the website of the Smithsonian, you will see that Neil Armstrong's complete in-flight coverall garment is there. So his jacket, trousers, and boots. Michael Collins' jacket, trousers, and boots are at the Smithsonian. They have Buzz's trousers and boots, but not the jacket. So that makes this the only flown garment from the Apollo 11 mission that is available to be purchased. Together, I've gone out and gotten property from a variety of different owners, but this is directly from Buzz. I can say with no hesitation that it is the best space exploration sale to have ever happened, and there will not be another that will be better than this. The writing in these documents was made with that pen, so the pen didn't just save the mission, it helped to document the mission.
The price estimate is $1 to $2 million. The collection also includes awards, medals, and letters from the astronaut's life. Another top lot is a pen that the Apollo 11 crew used to repair a broken circuit breaker, saving their lives. The estimate stands to $1 to $2 million as well. The Buzz Aldrin American Icon sale will take place on Tuesday, July 26th. A separate sale will follow on Wednesday, July 27th, titled Meteorites, Select Specimens from the Moon, Mars, Vesta, and More. On sale will be the end piece of a lunar meteorite, which is a rock ejected off the lunar surface following an asteroid impact. And Long Island shores are seeing more sharks visiting. At least 3 people have suffered bites in the past month. Experts say there could be reported sightings every week or two. Drone video captured by a lifeguard patrolling for sharks off Long Island's Jones Beach on July 11th shows a large shark chasing after a school of fish. Cleaner oceans, warmer water temperatures, and a resurgence of bunker fish that sharks feed on are seen as factors. Detection from drones to helicopters has also improved. The increase in numbers of sharks is a sign that conservation efforts have succeeded in helping restore ecological balance to the oceans, experts say.
That's great. The Rewilding Foundation in Argentina has added 2 Jaguar pups to their repopulation program. The 2 wild pups were born in Argentina's Corrientes province in May this year. It's the first time it's happened in over 70 years, and their survival sparks hope for the repopulation program in Argentina's Iberá wetlands. That's the home of 10 reintroduced animals. In Argentina, the jaguar is considered a national natural heritage, but there are only around 250 living in the wild there. And on another note, today is National Mango Day. With summer in full swing, why not enjoy one? The fruit was first cultivated more than 4,000 years ago in India. Fast forward to now, there are more than 500 varieties across the world. They're highly nutritious. One mango contains nearly 2.5 times more vitamin C than an orange. And they also contain vitamins A, B6, and K, as well as fiber, potassium, and antioxidants. So why not celebrate the day by eating one? Or if you're in the right climate, planting a mango tree.
Mangoes are pretty good. You know, I've never planted a mango tree, but on our family plantation in Indiana, I planted some pawpaw trees.
What is that?
Well, it's actually a tropical fruit. They call it the banana of Indiana.
Oh, really? So how does it taste?
Well, I don't know. I didn't stick around long enough for the tree to grow.
Oh, bummer. So where do I get one now?
I don't know, actually. You have to source one.
Well, that's all for today's program. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selected videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.